Welcome back to Ask Nico, where you guys ask me questions and I do my best to try and give you advice. The first question is from Poison77. I need advice about getting older. I'm only 13, turning 14, and I'm going into high school in September. And I just realized I'm getting older and my childhood is getting farther and farther away from me. I don't want to grow up. I don't want to get older. It's scary to me. Do you have any advice on this? Poison, you're not alone in this, okay? I think mostly every adult I know wants to be a kid again. Now, there is an exception to that, being me. Yes, there are things that I miss from my childhood, but I don't miss it enough to have to go back to school. Really didn't like school. But you're only 13 turning 14. You still have about 4 years of being a kid and having all the perks of being a kid. Yes, you're going to be an older kid. You're going to be a teenager and go through puberty and all that fun stuff, but the truth is, it's a beautiful thing, okay? Growing up is a beautiful thing. There's nothing to be afraid of. Think of yourself growing up as leveling up in a game. You get access to more things. You get access to explore the world more. You can drive cars and be more independent of your parents and do all these fun things. And let me tell you something else. Getting older doesn't mean that you have to completely abandon your childhood, okay? You can still be a kid in certain ways even when you're older. For example, people associate Legos with being a kid and playing with Legos and all that. But there's also adults that play with Legos and build whole, contraptions in their basements out of them. Another childhood thing is going to Disney World, right? That's a big thing in the US. Kids like to go to Disney World and experience all the rides and all that stuff. And some Disney kids become Disney adults and like to go to Disney every year and be experiencing their childhood cartoons and characters and be a kid through those means. You can still have access to your childhood. It's just going to be a little bit different. I like being an adult more than I liked being a kid. And the main reason why is because I don't have to go to school anymore. That's right. I'm done with school. I never have to go to school anymore. And I don't have to do that blasted homework anymore that I hated doing. I hated doing homework. Homework was like the bane of my existence. Sure, depending on your job, you might have to bring work home once in a while, but you don't have to do your stupid math problems or your stupid history homework or your philosophy essay or whatever the hell it is that teachers like to assign these days. But I'm going to end with this. If you're afraid of your childhood kind of just like falling further and further away, make sure that you try to make the rest of your childhood as good as possible for you to remember later in life. Because those memories are priceless. Go out with your friends, play with your toys, ask out your middle school or high school crush. Do it all. Like, experience it as much as you can. Play video games. Do whatever it is you like and just do more of it. But regardless, don't be scared. Best of luck, and thank you for your question. The next question is from MossyTree47. Good evening, Nico. I'm currently 15 years old and I absolutely hate where I live, to the point that I think about it every single day and it's starting to negatively impact my life. So basically, I'm a very outdoorsy person. I adore seeing trees, rivers, wildlife, etc. But the problem is that I live in a town with literally no nature at all. I'm completely surrounded by agricultural fields on all sides, and once the fields end, it's just desert. I know this doesn't sound like that serious of a problem, but this is really starting to make me depressed since all I want in life is to be able to explore forest and go hiking and all that stuff. But I just simply can't since I'm located hours away from the nearest nature place, and even if there was nature around me, it's extremely hot where I live. Since I'm 15, I obviously can't just move out or drive to the mountains. It also doesn't help that me and my family are pretty broke. I hope you will read this comment and hopefully give me some advice in your next video. Alright, so I abbreviated that a little bit, but I'm getting what you're putting down here. It's hard being in a place where you don't want to be, because I had a similar experience. I grew up in a town in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't like it because it was too small. There were not enough people. Everybody knew everyone's business, and I wanted a bigger city life. And the nearest big enough city was like 2 to 3 hours by car. When I was younger, I couldn't go there unless it was like some field trip or something, so I completely get what you're talking about. The way I kind of combated that is that I brought the city to me. And what I mean by that is that luckily through the internet and through the vast amounts of technology we have today, I started going on YouTube and researching cities and shows, and I would go on Google Maps and explore the world and see borders and all kinds of fun stuff because I very much enjoyed maps and stuff. I would play video games like GTA, which would bring a city to me because as many of us know, the GTA games just basically put you in a large American city for the most part, and you can explore and drive and do all those kinds of things. So for you, you could play a game like I guess Minecraft would be one of them. You could play a game like The Forest, or you could play any other like calm nature exploration game that can kind of bring that to you, even though you don't necessarily have access to it. You could also read books about nature and watch documentaries about nature. And you can kind of bring nature to yourself in a way for the time being without actually having to go out into nature. And this doesn't really fix your problem long term. It kind of gives you a bit of an out, a bit of a way to explore more of the world without actually being able to explore it. And like you said, you're only 15. It's not like you can really just go somewhere by yourself that often, especially if it's super far away, right? I mean, you could theoretically take a bus to like the nearest national park or something of the sort, but I'm sure that's not as easily accessible. So what I'll say to you is this. You're 15. If you're able to have some patience and you're able to substitute some of that nature-seeking thrill with the various types of technology we have, then you will eventually be able to get into more nature. Like you said, you will eventually be able to move out and drive and do all these fun things, and you won't have to rely on, video games, television, technology, and books or whatnot to get your nature fix. But take from my experience, okay? I was able to substitute that for a while, and then eventually I moved out to bigger places and bigger cities, and I went to school where there was more people that I could talk to and deal with like that, because that's what I wanted to do. So you'll eventually get out of your situation. You just have to wait it out a little bit. And you know what? While you wait it out, why not research all the places you want to go and explore and all the nature-filled locations that you'd like to do stuff in, right? Make a plan, make a bucket list. And it's going to be so much more fun when you finally get to those places. But regardless, I hope this helps, and best of luck to you. The next question is from regular person 7151. Hey, I have a simple question to ask. How do I communicate effectively? Like being comfortable about opening up or talking about feelings and such. It's something I've struggled with for several years. Some reasons why communicating has been difficult for me is because I have been always afraid of how people would see me differently or use my problems against me. It's a fear that I've had for a long time. Because of this, I've had many trust issues with my family, friends, and the people around. So overall, I just want to know how I can be comfortable with communicating my thoughts or how I feel. That's a good question. I think a lot of people have that problem. I think for the most part, communicating effectively comes down to talking to people. The more you talk to people, the more you'll be able to learn how to talk to them. It's kind of like a muscle. Like the more you lift weights, the more weight you'll be able to lift. But you have to also communicate intentionally. I'm not talking about just talking to your friends every day. Like that's not the same thing. Communicating effectively requires you to actually think about what you're saying and learn from what you're saying. Like if you say something that might hurt someone, you have to learn from what you said and try not to do it again. Or if you compliment someone and make a friend through that compliment, then you have to retain that idea of, complimenting people is good. And then as far as you talking about your feelings and such, I found that a way that I was able to start communicating better and being open about what I'm talking about is actually talking into a camera. It might sound weird, but when I started making YouTube videos, I was kind of introverted. Like I liked people, but I didn't know how to talk to them. So when I started talking into a microphone and into a camera, I became more comfortable in my own voice and comfortable in communicating how I felt and what I wanted to communicate. So maybe talking into a camera might help you. And it doesn't have to be like an actual professional camera. It can be your webcam. It could be your phone that you just talk to. And you just maybe have a little rant session with yourself. And you talk to yourself about what you're feeling. And you can kind of use that as a diary, or you could delete it right afterwards. And that will get you talking, at least. That will get you in a place where you're comfortable with talking, and you might be more comfortable with hearing yourself talk. Because then you get an idea of what you sound like. And I'll tell you, it's a lot easier for me to talk to people these days because I understand what I sound like. I sit here and edit my own videos and my voice all the time. So I'm very comfortable with what I sound like in my voice and communicating to others what I feel and whatnot. As far as you being afraid of how people will see you differently or use your problems against you, I find that the more you're open about things, the less people have to use against you. Think of yourself as a blank canvas right now. Think of yourself as just a painting that hasn't been painted. And then when you start talking about your feelings and communicating how you feel, you start using red paint on yourself. You're like covering this canvas with red paint. If somebody tries to use your problems against you, they're basically just putting more red paint over the same red paint. As long as you don't let that paint just make you heavier and you don't take it to heart, nothing will ever be able to bother you. I don't know if that fully makes sense, and it's kind of easier said than done, but here's an example. Let's say you're self-conscious about your grades and you failed the math test, and you tell everyone that you failed the math test, and then someone tries to like, quote, expose you and make fun of you about it, and then you can just turn around and say, yeah, I was the one who told everyone that I failed my own math test. Got anything else? And think of how much power that takes away from people, because you're putting yourself out there. You're putting yourself in the situation of being, I guess, exposed to the world, but on your own terms. It's kind of freeing. It's kind of taking the weight off of your own shoulders by just not keeping it in anymore. If you let things just kind of roll off of you, like if you just let that same color of red paint be another layer of red paint, then you'll be fine emotionally. And this doesn't apply to every situation, but it can apply to a few. And another thing about people that are going to see you differently or use your problems against you is that you probably don't want those people in your life anyway. So there's nothing to really fear about that, in my opinion. It's kind of just doing what's necessary and dealing with your emotions and dealing with your emotions in terms of what people you want to have around you. So to summarize, you first have to kind of open up to yourself. Like you have to communicate with yourself first, like talk to yourself. And it might sound weird. It might sound like a weird thing to do, but trust me, talk to yourself into a camera, into a microphone, whatever. Communicate those feelings into those mediums, okay? Delete them afterwards, keep them, do whatever you want. And then try to do the same when you're talking in front of people, okay? And talking in front of people that you would like to trust or you do trust. And just say the same things. And a few times it might be weird, it might be awkward. People might not know what to say. People might react maybe negatively. And you'll kind of see based on people's reactions and what you're doing, how communicating those feelings helps or doesn't help you. And try your best to be clear with what you're saying and think about what you say. Because a lot of the times when you don't think about what you say, a lot of the times when you're not clear, you kind of have this word vomit. Like basically what I do with my yapping videos. I just kind of word vomit a lot. And sometimes I have to change what I'm saying. But I hope this helps. I think I kind of went on a bit of a ramble there, but best of luck to you. And don't be so afraid of people judging you. Their words and actions can only hurt you as much as you let them. The next question is from Silly Billy 1. Hey Nico, I'm a male high school student and there's this girl in my class who I've already become good friends with that I want to ask out. I feel conflicted since I know my feelings for her are growing, but I also know that at the moment, we're good friends and I don't want to lose that relationship. I want to ask her out, but I'm afraid, whether her answer is yes or no. It'll change the way we interact, thus ruining our relationship. I know a confession of feelings makes things awkward, and most high school relationships don't end well anyways, but I can't help these growing feelings I'm having. Do you have any suggestions or pieces of advice that could help me make that right decision? Thanks. Billy, here's the thing. It's never easy to ask a girl out, okay? It's never easy to ask a girl out, especially a girl that's your friend that might not be interested in you in the same way. But here's the thing. If you keep suppressing that feeling, if you keep suppressing the fact that you want to ask her out and you want to date her, you're going to end up probably resenting her for no reason too. Because at some point, she might get into a relationship. She might find a guy that she likes, and it might not be you. And you're going to be annoyed, and you're not going to want to be her friend anyway, because you're probably going to get jealous. You might think you're not a jealous person, but oh wow, does it suck when you watch somebody that you want to date somebody else, especially in high school. There's nothing more annoying than that. So basically, these are your two options. You either A, continue being her friend, and when the time comes that she finds someone, you're going to be pissed off and kind of miserable about it because you never asked her out, you never made a move, you never did anything. But your friendship is still intact, which is fine, I guess, but that's not what you really want. And then there's a second version of this, where you ask her out, and she either says yes, and that's fine and dandy, and then you can, date for a bit, maybe you get into a relationship, and great, that's what you wanted. And you might have a bit of a strain on the relationship. Maybe you stop talking as much, which can also be a good thing because then you're not necessarily wasting your time pursuing this girl. You're not wasting your time developing feelings for someone who is not interested in you. And you can maybe pursue someone else. Maybe you open up your heart for somebody else that might also be interested. But like you said, you kind of do risk that weirdness of the friendship. And you can get out of that weirdness. By the way, it just takes a lot more work. But if I were you, this is what I would do as someone who has both asked someone out who was my friend and not asked out someone out who was my friend and regretting it later. I think you should go for it. I think you should ask this girl out. And I think there's very many different ways you can go about this depending on how you want to play it. The first way is be the good old honest Abe and say, look, I think you're pretty. I like you. I want to be more than just friends with you. And I think we would make a good couple. And just straight up say that. And that's the direct, scary approach where you have no idea what she's going to say. It's a very 50-50 coin toss version of that. Another way you can go about it is you can test out how she feels about you. And there's a few ways to do this. I think a good one is the hug test. When you hug this friend of yours, if you've ever hugged her, right? Do you go in for a long hug that can last a few seconds? Or is it a short side hug? Or is it a short pat on the back kind of hug? Because that will tell you immediately how she feels about you. If it's the first one, if it's that long hug that can last a few seconds and it's like, a very powerful embrace, then chances are she might feel similar about you. If it's a side hug or the friendly pat on the back hug, it's probably not looking great for you. In which case you might have to do some work in making her feel attracted to you. Then there's another more sneaky, slightly more toxic approach where you can act like you like this other girl and you ask her about her opinion on this girl. And depending on how she responds, she might kind of brush it off. She might say, oh, I think she's okay, but you can do better. That's a good sign because that might mean that she wants to be that better person for you. Or she might just throw you to the wolves and say, oh, I think she's great. You should date her. That is an indication of her not being interested. But you also have to be very careful of the tone of how she says it. If she kind of just says it like too quickly and she's like, oh yeah, definitely go do that, she might be aware that you like her and want to get you off her back. But if she's kind of apprehensive and she's like, well, I think she's cool. Yeah, you should definitely go for her. I mean, I don't know. That might just be her deflecting and trying to say, oh, well, this kind of sucks, but like, I guess I'm not going to say anything about it. There's a lot of ways. You have to pay attention to her body language. You have to pay attention to the tone of her voice, the responses, her everything. Everything in these conversations is important. However, be very careful of this approach because this is a very backdoor kind of toxic approach that might lead to you having issues with it later. Like she might not like the fact that you tried to do that in order to gauge if she likes you or not. So I wouldn't recommend this one, but it's also an option. And there are many different approaches that you can look up and read up on, but honestly, the best one is to just be straight up. Don't be too emotional. Don't be too crazy. Just show the fact that you have an interest in her and more than being just friends. And if she says yes, great. If she says no, oh well. But if she does say no, you need to make a big change in the way you deal with that relationship. You cannot act like you're her boyfriend even though you're not. You can't be the guy that's all chivalrous and will pay for her food and opens up the door and just be doing boyfriend things when you're not in the boyfriend category for her. And see how she likes that. See how different she acts towards you when you put her in the friend zone in that case. There are so many different ways you can go about this. I can honestly talk about this topic for hours. In any case, best of luck to you. And yeah, just go for it, man. Go for it. Strategize about it for a bit, but don't wait too long because eventually someone else is going to come along and take this girl from you. And the final question is from Dr. Crafty. Hi, Niko. Simple one here. How would you recommend balancing a social life and a work-school life? For someone who enjoys social activities that may hinder work, but is also gifted with natural intelligence and shouldn't waste it. Gifted with natural intelligence and shouldn't waste it is a very interesting way to put it. It's also a very fun way to put it. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. Depending on the country you live in, the work-life balance thing is very different. Like here in the US, work-life balance can sometimes be non-existent depending on the job that you have. I think school-life balance can be a lot easier. So I'll give you an answer for both. If you want work-life balance, you have to set the boundary and you have to apply for jobs that are going to give you that work-life balance. Great work-life balance jobs are ones that have to do with the government. Government jobs, government employees, clock in at 9 and clock out at 5. There's no going extra. There's no sitting there an extra 3 minutes because that's just how the government kind of operates. They're in and out and the times that they're supposed to be. Another way is that you look for jobs that are in places that promote the work-life balance, that don't want you overworking yourself. I'm sure certain corporate jobs are like that. I wouldn't take a job like being a lawyer. I wouldn't take a job like being a doctor. I wouldn't take any of those crazy high net worth jobs that in most cases will require you to not have that work-life balance. And if you can't really get past to finding a job that's going to give you an option of work-life balance, you might have to set boundaries with said job. Okay, you might have to say, look, at the end of the day, I'm logging off. Okay, I don't care what happens. I don't care who calls me. I'm logging off. And you might suffer a bit with that, like especially in the US, because there's kind of this expectation that you are available should somebody need to reach you. And that's okay for emergencies, but don't make your emergency services the norm, because then you start charging people more for that. That's basically how it is. It's overtime. You're working too much. You want to get paid more. But I'm also not the best to ask when it comes to jobs specifically, because I'm severely bad at having a work-life balance, okay? As far as a school life balance, however, school life balance is a lot easier. School life balance is dependent solely on what grades you want. And it's also much easier in college. In high school, it's simple. You're in school regardless all day, no matter what. You're in there from 8 to 2 or whatever the hell your school is. So you have to do that regardless. That's one part. Then you have your homework, okay? If you can get your homework done pretty quickly, that leaves a lot of time left for you to go on and do whatever you want. And at the same time, you don't have to be an A student. You don't have to be the top of your class. You can be a good student and not get all A's, okay? And I'm not encouraging you to slack off. I'm just encouraging you to, allow yourself to be a kid and do stuff. And as far as then going into college, I think college is 10 times easier. I think college was so much easier than high school for me. And before anyone jumps on my back and says, well, you were a film major, obviously, let me remind you that I had to take general education classes like the rest of my peers, and we all had similar ones, and some of them were harder, some of them were easier, whatever. But we all had to go through those ones, and those were pretty hard sometimes. Still got straight A's, still had a life in college while I was doing those classes. Honestly, I think while I was doing the general education ones, I think I was having an easier time overall. The classes for my major were easy, but I was also really good at my major. So that was basically it. But the main thing of the whole work-life balance conversation is you have to make an effort to have a life. You have to make an effort to go out and hang out with your friends and do things and go to a golfing club or a knitting club or whatever the hell people do these days. I have no idea. But as long as you have like a set thing that you like to do during the week, like every Wednesday you go to your gym, you go to the pottery class, whatever you do, just make sure you keep doing it. And that will force you to make time for that thing. It will force you to have a work-life balance, and you will find ways around it. You will find ways around your work and your school to make time for the things that you want to do. But that's only if you have things that you want to do and that you would like to pursue. Because if you don't have those things, then it's going to be harder for you to set boundaries for your work life. But I think that's everything for today. This might be a long one. Holy shit, I've been recording for some time now. But if you have questions that you would like me to answer, leave them in the comments below. And if you would like priority answers for your questions, go become a member of my Patreon. I answer all the questions that come from my patrons. And yeah, good night and good luck, everybody.